Overwatch is one of the new crop of insanely popular esports associated PC titles, and like other esports titles, is generally quite forgiving on the hardware front. In fact, Overwatch's own stated system requirements are an 8-year-old Radeon 4850, giving you an idea of how old the hardware Blizzard expected players to be running. Unlike other esports favorites like CSGO and Dota 2, Overwatch is a much more visually rich experience and is more akin to other 2016 alumni such as Battlefield 1 and Titanfall 2. And in the same vein, Overwatch really is designed to be played at 60 FPS or close to it. This is not a difficult metric to achieve even on weaker graphics cards. An added plus is that Overwatch at its lowest settings does not look that bad at all. So how far does Overwatch's optimization take the low-end Radeon RX 550? For starters, while I already knew Overwatch is one of the best running games out there, I still went into it a bit pessimistic. The RX 550 at standard boost clocks is right under 1.2 teraflops in compute and at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to current PC graphics cards. There is worse you could have, like the previously mentioned Radeon 4850, but there is much better you could have too. Also runs fine on newer CPU dual cores and better yet those with hyper-threading. Most of my testing was with an old but still reasonable i3-2120 hyper-threaded dual-core processor with 10 gigs of DDR3, Windows 7, all running on a PNY SSD. CPU usage rarely got high enough to be a concern, even when running the high presets. With that out of the way, let's see how the RX 550 does in Overwatch. For starters, I shot straight for 1080p low settings with the ambient occlusion and local reflections enabled. I want to mention that the maps I played on were all over the place. There was very little consistency in map selection as I just stuck with the arcade mode. Whatever happened, happened, and my take on performance map to map wasn't different enough to really worry about. Because of that, I still feel my conclusions are valid. Using this low setting config, the RX 550 delivers the promise of 60 FPS 1080p gameplay with Overwatch. In fact, it did so better than I initially expected, and it's often not readily apparent you're running low presets. This is much in thanks to the aforementioned visual style and a lack of environmental object pop-in other games struggle with. LED transitions exist obviously, but they are well hidden, and with so much insanity happening on screen usually, you tend not to notice them. After such a successful run at the low preset, I went ahead and shot for the medium preset, first with the low anti-aliasing setting that uses FXAA, and then with the medium setting that uses SMAA. Here I really expected the limits of the RX 550 to rear their ugly heads, and I was genuinely gobsmacked to have the RX 550 still maintain a near 60 FPS experience. The reality was more like a consistent 50 FPS as the frame rate experienced some fluctuations. Even without VSync, the game still felt pretty smooth, and I got a noticeable visual boost. The performance difference between FXAA and SMAA is pretty negligible, though SMAA is a bit cleaner. My most noticed difference was texture quality, which I'd use even if I elected to set everything else to low. Of course, I went ahead and tested just about all high settings sans the 2x SMAA. As enticing as a bit more visual splendor might be, I honestly didn't see that big of an improvement. And of course there was a frame rate hit. While still playable, a bouncy 40 FPS average just isn't ideal when you need Twitch aiming capabilities. Obviously the more frames the better, but getting them would require a reduction in render resolution or using the render scaler. So if you're playing or planning on playing Overwatch with the RX 550 at 1080p, my recommended configuration would be sticking to the medium preset if you're okay with just sub 60 FPS gameplay, and stick with low if you really want a 60 plus experience. And of course you may find an amalgam of settings across the entire range worth it to you. That's for you to decide. I'm just trying to give people an idea of how this card practically handles Overwatch. Your mileage may vary. And speaking of mileage, we're at the end of this video. As always, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my new vids coming down the pipe. Take care, and I'll see you next time.